Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I wanted to react to a debate between Andrew Klavan and Pearl. Andrew Klavan is a member of the Daily Wire crew, and as you know, there's been a kind of war between the tradcons and the red pillars, and a lot of back and forth on Twitter. So now we finally have Pearl appearing on a member of the Daily Wire crew show. So let's go ahead and react to some of it. It's about 36 minutes long, so I encourage you to go watch the whole thing, but I'm going to react to some choice moments here. Let's take a look.
If men are not supposed to get married, what is a man's life supposed to look like?
I don't say they should or they shouldn't.
Okay.
I think every guy has to decide for himself.
Okay.
You guys' options are going to be different than a different guy's options. I'm not here to tell men what to do. But I think using a blanket statement telling men to get married young without fully understanding women today and the laws is not the wisest.
Right. Well, people who marry
because in a business deal, you would never sign a contract in business that the other party is paid to leave. It would not be wise, right? If me and you were to do a business deal together, and if I break the deal, I get your children, half of your stuff, and I can ruin your reputation. You would never do it.
Well, I mean,
and it's not uncommon.
But
30% of divorces are malicious.
So people who are married are happier, healthier, they have more sex, they live longer. So about 1% of business startups succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a high risk, right? To start business, you pour money into it, you put all your soul in it, you put all that work, maybe your time, maybe you get older, and then it fails. It's 99% of the time it's going to fail. So it's a high risk business, but the payoff can be big.
I don't think his example of entering into a high risk business as a business person exactly matches with what Pearl's saying. Pearl's talking about a business partnership with someone in which you guys are equals in the business, except, one person is incentivized to leave, and if they breach the contract, they get to take a lot of the assets of the business with them. Andrew Klavan gave what I would consider to be a different example. He's talking about you as an individual starting a business, and yeah, that's true. It can fail, but that's not the same as saying that, you start a business, whether it's by yourself or even with partners, and that one person breaches that business contract and it leads to a failure, but they get to take everything and go. I mean, there would be all kinds of lawsuits filed after that if they did any kind of misconduct in that business.
So marriage, too, has become a higher risk business than it used to be.
Why do you attribute it to marriage?
Why do I attribute?
Women tend to select for good-looking, handsome, healthy, high-earning men. Why do we attribute happiness to marriage?
Because I've seen it.
How do you measure happiness?
Well, I've seen it. I've seen that all the happiest people I've ever met have been in long-term marriages.
Well, I've also seen the other end of it. I've seen men get married and lose all of their stuff.
Right. So you're saying it's a high risk. It's a high risk thing but it's a high reward thing.
I think it's great that he's seen some happy marriages, but a lot of people, especially people who don't want to sign the marriage state contract, have seen a lot of people get divorced, and specifically the generation that is of age appropriate to get married now. I mean, a lot of them have grew up in households where they've seen what happened to their parents, particularly their father after a divorce. Maybe it was an uncle or someone that they knew, and marriage specifically, especially for men, is not looking as attractive as it used to be. And he himself just admitted that it's higher risk than it's ever been, which is, him basically admitting that, yes, the laws and what governs marriage is an issue.
What does a man get out of marriage that he doesn't get out of a live-in girlfriend?
That's an excellent question.
Well, that's kind of a strange question, because if she's a live-in girlfriend, then...
Which is not uncommon nowadays.
But a live-in girlfriend is effectively acting the wife.
Exactly. So why would you want to sign a state contract when you can basically have that without having the state's tentacles involved as deeply as it is? Now, to be clear, I mean, cohabitating with someone does have different legal implications than you guys living in two separate households and all this kind of stuff. Child support's obviously still a thing, but you know, as someone who used to work at a child support agency, there were two kind of cases that crossed my desk. There was guys paying child support that also had to pay alimony, and then there were guys who weren't married and they were just paying child support. And it's a lot easier to pay child support when you're not also paying alimony.
And can in this country anyway, after a while, can divorce you the same as a wife can. So there's no.
That's not entirely true. I mean, if you're in a common law state, maybe, but most states are not common law in that way anyways. I mean, California is a community property state, but it's not common law. So you can, you know, live with a long-term girlfriend or, you know, partner or whatever, and it's going to be different. So you're not going to have to worry about paying spousal or these kinds of things. So his retort here that just because some jurisdictions do that, that is not the majority of the U.S.
No advantage to it. So
that is completely not a true statement, so that there's no advantage to it. He basically is just writing off all the disadvantages of the state marriage contract, which most red pillars are complaining about, and saying, well, if you have a live-in girlfriend, there's really not much advantage to it. That's absolutely untrue.
I mean, that's a weird.
Right. So,
yeah.
Well, it's not an unfair question. Why does he have to get the state involved?
Well, it's not for many of us. It's not the state; it's the church. I mean, it's a religious act, and it also. I mean, look, I got married. When I got married, I had lived with my wife for 2 years. I saw absolutely no reason to get married, except we wanted to have kids and we wanted to be a family with one name, and so we got married. And the minute I got married, I knew everything had changed.
See, that's really strange. The red pillars, or I don't think anyone's really attacking a religious covenant marriage. And I don't know why he just can't say, well, you know, get a marriage at the church, you know, and have it done and officiated by them. But we're okay with you guys not getting the state contract if that's what the major problem is. But for some reason, he doesn't want to just come out and say that. It's very surprising, because he basically answers this question saying, well, you know, it's not most of us, it's not the state, it's the church, which is untrue. Most people are getting married under the with the state, you know, marriage license and certificate. Most people are not just getting a religious ceremony and then saying they're married. But he should just advocate for that. I think we'd be okay with that.
Because people are ritual oriented. Ritual means something. And so the marriage did change everything. It changed it on the instant. I mean, I knew the second I did it. I knew the second I did it, I'd done the smartest thing I'd ever done.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about your marriage though. And I think sometimes you guys take it kind of personal, where it's like, well, but I'm saying, because you guys always refer to your marriages. But we're not talking about you guys.
Well, I'm
talking about marriage as an institution. The average marriage is 8 years.
But what I'm saying,
70% are filed by women. Only 5% of women are marriageable under the age of 35. 90% of child support and alimony goes to women from men. 30% of divorces are malicious. It's not about you guys, but overall the institution. How can you look at those numbers and not see that it's broken? Something's wrong.
Well, again, it's high risk, high reward.
Well, again, but you always attribute.
The funny thing about that is it's higher risk than it's ever been. You know, and he even admits that at the beginning, that it's more risk than it's ever been. But at a certain point, you know, men generally will take more risks than women. But at a certain point, when the risks start to border on foolish and ridiculous, then most sane people will take a step back.
The reward to marriage.
Well, because
I think I'll give you an example. I think that successful men were going to be successful anyways. I don't think you can attribute it just to their family and women. I think men that are on a mission are on a mission regardless. They're going to be successful regardless. Women select for successful men. I don't attribute it to marriage and family. I attribute it to men following maybe God and their purpose.
But isn't it kind of strange that all those successful men, the first thing they do when they stand up at an awards dinner is thank their wives?
See, just that too. It's very clear that he is just coming from a different time and a different era. I mean, you can see, you know, he's an older gentleman, and you know, he's talking about a marriage that he's had that's very successful. So very clearly, he has not been involved in the dating scene probably for, I don't know how old he is, but I'd say at least over 25 years, maybe even 30 years, maybe even more, depending on how old he is. And he's talking about it as if, we're talking about marriage in, I don't know, the 70s or the 80s or something like that, like right when these laws first started changing, but the culture hadn't become what it is now. I think he's just really, really unaware of what it looks like out there.
They seem to feel that their wives had something to do with it.
Well, 49% of billionaires are divorced.
So you're saying, you're saying two things. I mean, it's one thing. See, the point where I agree with you is I think that marriage can be a bad deal from the stats, but you're saying two things that, like, you're actually saying that marriage itself, which has made so many of the men I know will attribute not just their success but their manhood to marriage. They'll say, like, my marriage made a man out of me. So
no,
so you're saying it's bad even when it's good.
No, I didn't say that. I think there are good marriages out there.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think it's the rule. I think it's the exception.
He's talking about men attributing that marriage made a man out of them, and that a lot of successful men attribute their success or to their wives or whoever. I can see that being the case maybe 50, 60 years ago, but nowadays saying that sounds like you're putting the cart before the horse, because what Pearl's trying to say is that women are actually select for success now before they get married, because people are getting married at older ages. They're not getting married at 19, 20, 21 anymore. They're getting married at like 27 to 30, meaning that women are selecting guys who have already reached some level of success in their lives. It used to be you guys, got paired up and walked up the mountain together to get to the top. Now a woman wants to see a man already at the top, and she wants, the quick elevator ride up there. And I don't think Andrew Klavan is understanding what she's saying, because Red Pill has essentially correctly identified what women are selecting to get married. And I think in Andrew Klavan's time, it was just different. People got married young. The man necessarily wasn't successful because you guys are so young. So it's like not like he had time to build his career. And for him, it just seems like so alien why Red Pillars are saying what they're saying.
Why do we have phrases like it's cheaper to keep her? Happy wife, happy life. Why are those common?
Well, I think those are really dumb phrases. But why?
Well, it doesn't matter if you think they're dumb. It matters that they exist.
But right?
You're talking, and why isn't if marriage was such a good deal? Why aren't men signing up?
You're talking about two separate things, though. You're talking about the culture, which is we're obviously in a sick culture. We all know. I think everybody knows that. But you're also talking about the question. Let me put it to you this way: what do you think a man's life should look like? Because, for instance, I think if I said, what should a man's life look like, it would include marriage and family and children. I think that would be the best thing. Now, you want to say, here's a guy who shouldn't be like that, or here's a society that's falling apart and makes it difficult. Those are two different things. But what do you think a man's life should look like?
I think every man has to decide that for himself.
Right.
Like Jesus wasn't married.
Well, okay, we'll exempt the son.
I'm saying there's examples.
If we can exempt the Son of God for a minute.
No, but there's examples of great men in history that didn't get married.
Yeah, but there's examples of great men in history who were miserable too. I mean, that's not a good argument.
I know, but that's my point. I don't think marriage is for every man, and there's not enough wives to go around.
It's interesting because he's like, what, do you think a man's life should look like? And I think what he's getting at with this question is that there is this traditional pathway that men take, and that he's advocating for men to take. And the tradcons, the Daily Wire conservatives, they don't want to see this traditional pathway for a man obliterated. But the world that men are growing up in today is a world where the traditional pathway for women has essentially been deconstructed. And the women are essentially acting outside of their traditional roles. Men are continuing to act or to try to act in their traditional roles, but it's just leading to them shooting themselves in the foot, because you get with somebody who maybe wants to be traditional, for a few years, and then she decides this isn't for her anymore. Then she gets divorced, and the laws just fall on you. So Andrew Klavan is saying, well, what should life for a man look like? And that really is the $1 million question, because since the feminine traditional role has been essentially deconstructed with the, events of the past 60, 70, even 100 years. Men are now sitting here and they're thinking, well, all right, traditional life isn't really an option for most of us because most women don't want to be traditional. So it's going to lead to a failure because it takes both parties to, uphold their end of the deal. And men are now needing to discover what masculinity looks like in a post-traditional society. However, Daily Wire types like Andrew Klavan and Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles, they're just still living in denial that traditionalism is essentially gone for the vast majority of society.
Yeah.
And so what are men supposed to do in the meantime?
It's an interesting thing to say. I'm just trying to get at the thing that you're saying, because I'm a little confused about it, to be honest with you. Like the idea that the culture is so broken that men shouldn't get married
No, I don't say should or shouldn't.
Okay. You're saying it's a bad deal.
I say it's objectively a bad deal for men.
Right. By the numbers.
Because of the way the court system is structured.
Yes, not just by the stats, but very much so. If you look at the laws, you can see that they very much punish the provider and the supporter's role. Forget if it's a man or woman who's making the money, but the traditional masculine provider role, whether that's even filled by a man or a woman, is just highly, punished. And it's not a fair deal for whoever steps into that role if you're just looking at the laws.
That's the reason. It's not because women, of the nature of women themselves. It's that. I mean, is that what you're saying?
That's what I said.
Yeah. No. Is what you're saying that the court systems are so bad that?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, I don't.
But wait. Just a minute. I just want to make sure I understand. But you're not saying that you shouldn't get married because women are a pain in the neck or whatever.
No, I'm saying.
I get what he's trying to parse out. He's trying to say, are you saying men shouldn't get married just because of the laws or because of the nature of woman? I don't know if he should have used the term nature of woman. I think it would have been better phrased if he would have said women's behavior. What's essentially going on is that women's behavior is enabled by their ability to essentially exploit the laws for what they are. The laws are constructed in a way that punishes the provider role, which then enables women to behave badly by taking advantage of those laws. So both the behavior and the laws are pretty much wound up together. And the more a man steps into the provider traditional role, the more it actually enables the woman to be able to take advantage of that with the laws. And that's essentially what red pillars have brought up as an issue.
Every man has to decide for himself.
Right.
But there are not enough wives to go around. I mean, objectively, there are not enough wives to go around in 2024.
If someone came to you and said, Pearl, I really understand what you're saying about the court system, and I really understand what you're saying about women, but I really want to get married. That seems to me the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to have children. The meaning of life is to build a family. The meaning of life is to have a home. What advice would you give them?
I'm not really in the business of giving advice, but I would say get a prenup, consult your attorney in your state. You have to be careful. I mean, it might be funny to you, but I've seen men on the brink of suicide after this stuff.
Sure.
I've seen men marry. I interviewed one guy who married a traditional Eastern European girl. And, he lost his job. He lost his house. He lost his children. He hadn't seen them in 2 years, even though they were a mile from him. Andrew, these are real things that happen every single day. Men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide after a divorce.
Right.
Men have to be careful. They have to protect themselves.
But I think, listen, all of this stuff I get and I hear that, but I think you're dodging something here. I really do. I think every study I've ever seen shows that a happy marriage makes men happier and makes people happier. And my experience is that the people I know who are happily married are the happiest people I know. So high risk, high reward, and you kind of dodge the fact that it's high reward. I mean, I guess what I'm saying to you is, like, when you give this general piece of advice,
It's not advice.
Well, when you give this, it is. It's saying that this is a bad deal, that you should go into it feeling it's a bad deal. It's a form of advice.
Well, it's a bad deal because women are paid to leave.
Right. So
that's why it's a bad deal.
Right. So.
And we have a culture that doesn't shame women for leaving either.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is what interests me about what you're saying.
When he asked for, what advice would you give men, I would just point out that the way that the laws are constructed now is that it's basically selecting for a type of family life that is not traditional. If a man was going to sign the state contract, it's way more beneficial for him to sign it with someone who's making similar money as him. I mean, when I worked at the child support office, I had to read a lot of divorce orders because we would often modify into them to get child support. And a lot of the divorces that were more, I guess you could say, less contentious were typically divorces between people who made around the same amount of money, because what would happen is that, a lot of it's done by a calculator, and you type in one person's income on this side, you type in the other parent's income on this side. And if it's about the same amount of income and custody's, split, there's not really any child support to be paid. And it's similar with spousal support. So for the most part, on those orders, it would typically say that both parties waive their right to spousal support. And then in the next line, it would say that the court terminates jurisdiction to even award it. And that would be the end of spousal support. And the only reason that's the case is because they were making around the same amount of money. I believe Andrew Klavan when he says that, a lot of the people that he sees in marriages are happy and that they don't regret the decision. But again, I just think he's coming from a vastly different time and generation where the culture was vastly different. And I think people probably fit into that traditional role a little bit more, but what we have now in our dating culture and in our culture as a whole is a culture of people who are not living traditionally. So I just think that his advice is a little dated, and I just wish he'd be a little bit more open to the idea that, maybe people should be just getting married through a covenant marriage through the church, but without the state contract. And if their faith is what's carrying them through this, then why even get the state contract? There's still other things that can happen. Paternity laws work outside of the marriage contract. Child support works outside of that. But that's, I would be more willing to deal with that on its own versus all the other stuff that come with the state marriage contract. Anyways, if I were you, I'd go check out the rest of this debate. It was pretty interesting. I give credit to Andrew for having Pearl on and at least having the discussion, because there's been a lot of talk of debates happening between high-profile people, and they've all kind of fallen through, which to me is a little disappointing, especially as a viewer. I'd love to see, some of the bigger names go at it. But at the very least, we have Pearl and Andrew Klavan discussing it. Anyways, leave your comments down below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.